Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. If you guys are new here, my name is Liz, and for today's video I have some really fun DIYs for you, kind of more on that farmhouse type theme. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, then let's go ahead and jump into today's video. For this first DIY, I'm going to take 3 of these wood pieces that you can get from the Dollar Tree. I'm also going to take these cheese boards that I got in a pack of 2 from the Target dollar spot. They were $5, and I'm going to start by painting them with my Dixie Belle chalk paint in sea glass, and I'm just going to give all of them one rough coat front and back. I didn't try to make this perfect, so you're just going to do one rough coat on the entire front and back of every piece. Once those are all painted and dried, I wanted to make these a little bit more rough and rustic, so I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper and I'm going to go through and sand down all the edges, make it so that natural wood is peeking through on the sides, and I just did that to every piece. Now I'm going to be using one of my CRICUT transfers on this, so I wanted to wax all my pieces to make sure that I didn't have any issues. So I'm just taking the wax that you can get from CRICUT in their little applicator, and I'm going to wax all the fronts of each of my pieces. I'm going to be using this Farmhouse Tile transfer from CRICUT. Now, I believe it is sold out at the moment. I was able to snag it on their restock. They do restocks every Thursday, so keep an eye out on Thursdays at 3 p.m. Mountain Standard Time for their restocks, and I'll be crossing my fingers that this one comes back into stock soon because this one is so pretty and I loved using it on this project. So I'm just laying my transfer out, and I am going to have each of my pieces under this all at the same time just to kind of make it easier on me while I'm adding the chalk paste to these pieces. So I just kind of laid all my pieces out where I wanted them to be, and then I'm going to use my chalk paste in white, and I'm just going to do these one by one. So I'm going to add my chalk paste, and then I will remove the piece from the back and then move on to the next piece. And I just did this for all 5 of my pieces. Now once that is done, I'm going to assemble my toolbox is what I'm going to make, or a little planter. So I'm just going to stick my one on the bottom, and then I'm going to stick my other 2 wood pieces from the Dollar Tree on top of that bottom piece on the sides. I'm just going to use some hot glue to adhere those together. And then for the side pieces, I'm just going to add some hot glue to those ends and then put my little cheese board on each of those ends. And then for a little bit more stability, I'm just going to take my hot glue gun and run it on the inside on those seams just to make sure that everything is nice and secure and it's not going to break off. Now I'm also going to take a wooden dowel. I believe this is 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to cut that down to the size that I need it to be, and I'm going to use a water-based stain to stain my dowel. This is a stain that you can't get anymore, so I would just use whatever stain that you love the best. I prefer water-based so that it isn't smelly and that it dries faster. And then I will just add some hot glue and put that between each of those cheese board handles. And then to add some fun florals for the middle, I'm going to take some floral foam from the Dollar Tree. I cut that down into a couple pieces, and then I'm just going to hot glue those down in there. And then I'm going to take some greenery and florals from Michael's. You can use whatever florals you have or wherever your preferred place to buy them at. I personally like Michael's the best. I don't know why. I just feel like their florals are higher quality and they just look so great. And there are so many options. It's one of my favorite things to do is go to Michael's and walk through their floral department because it's so gorgeous. So I just added my greenery first, and then I'm going to go in with some of these white floral, I don't know exactly what these are called, but I thought that they were cute. I just cut them apart, added them into my toolbox, and then I also grabbed some of these other white flowers that I thought were super pretty, and I just cut those each down on their own little stems and then added those into my toolbox last. And that is all you have to do for this DIY. I thought this turned out really, really cute. I love this color right now with the brown handle. I just thought it was so gorgeous. So that is it for this DIY. For this DIY, I grabbed one of these signs from the Target dollar spot. This was $5, and this is rather large, which I thought was a really great deal for the price. And I'm going to start by taking the hardware off the back. I am going to use the back as the front on this DIY. I just thought that the backing would be a lot easier to paint versus the front because it does kind of have that chalkboard finish on it. So I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint and plaster, and I'm just going to give this one coat. Again, I didn't do a super great job at painting this. There was a lot of spots where paint was missing, and that was perfectly okay because I did want this to be more on the farmhouse and rustic side. Now I'm going to take this pre-glued real wood veneer edging that I got from Amazon. I'll link it in my description box below, but I thought that this would be perfect for making any kind of frames that I wanted for my projects. So I picked this up and I am going to start cutting it down to use for a frame on this project. And I used my miter shears to give me 45-degree cuts. Those are always also linked in my description box as well. I just picked them up off of Amazon. So I just went through and started measuring out how long I needed my sides to be, and then I would give each end a 45-degree cut so that they all matched up together in all the corners. And I just did that for all the sides on my sign. Now I'm going to take some of my Waverly chalk paint and ink, and I'm going to use that to paint all of my frame pieces, and I wanted it to match the sides of the sign that it already was, so that's why I went with black. It would just make it a whole lot easier to match those up, and then the backing is black as well, so it all just kind of ties together. I'm going to adhere my strips to my sign, and the nice thing about this is you just have to apply some heat to it. So I just took my heat gun and added that heat to it and then pressed down because it does already have that glue on the back that you just have to heat up to get it to adhere to your surface, which is very nice, and I'm not having to try to hot glue. And whenever I hot glue things, it seems like it doesn't dry completely flat, so you're having kind of like bumps and it's just uneven. So this was actually really, really nice. I just had to heat it up and then press it down to my surface, and it was all nice and flat. And then I just repeated those steps for all 4 of those sides. Now I'm going to take this pack of rub-on transfers that I got from Dixie Belle. I used these in a previous video and they were so much fun. The quality of this is really, really nice and the vibrancy of the rub-on transfers is incredible. So I knew that I wanted to use that barn in a DIY, so that is what I'm going to use today. The barn comes in 2 different pieces, so I'm just going to kind of lay it out, figure out where I want it to go. It's centered where I want it to go. So I'm going to start with one side and I just kind of pull that backing up and stick it down and then remove the rest of the backing. Now I didn't want that bottom portion of the rub-on transfer to get onto the frame where it kind of has that creamy kind of wheat looking portion at the bottom. So I did take some of the backing and cover up the frame to protect it from getting the transfer on there. Now each of these transfers come with this big stick, kind of like a popsicle stick that you use to rub your transfer on. So you're just going to go over this entire thing and rub and rub and rub. And what I like to do is pull up the clear cover sheet, and as I'm pulling it, I'm just rubbing on right next to it, and that just kind of made it a lot easier to get that clear part to come up. And as you're pulling up, if you see something coming up that should be sticking down, just go back over it with that stick and get it to stick down on your sign. So then as I'm pulling up and there's still that kind of remaining transfer on the other backing sheets, I just go over it with a knife to cut those portions off. And then I have a nice clean line on all the edges. Now I'm going to go ahead and center the other side of the barn, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with the backing sheets covering the frame portion so that I don't get the transfer on the frame. And then as I was pulling this one up towards the bottom in that corner piece, it kind of messed up a little bit and the transfers didn't stick down, so there was a gap missing right there. I tried covering it up with another part of the transfer, but it didn't look very good. So in the end, I decided to make this piece even more rustic. You could leave it like this, but I decided that I wanted to rough it up a little bit more. So I took some sandpaper to all the edges. I wanted that natural wood to peek through on all the edges and the corners. And then I'm going to take some more sandpaper onto the sign itself, and I'm just going to make little, sanded marks and kind of distressed points on there. And then I also took some of my water-based stain that I have, and on a chip brush, I did a very light brush at first, and then I just kind of built my way up. So I started with a little, and then I kept going more and more as I went on and got, a little bit less nervous to do it because I didn't want to mess anything up. But I was able to cover up that mistake in the bottom corner with the water-based stain, and I just kind of dabbed around it. And I also dabbed around the parts where you could kind of see where the transfer started and stopped. So I just kind of did dabbing motions all over with that water-based stain to kind of hide those and make it look a little less noticeable. And I think that this one turned out absolutely beautiful. For this DIY, you are going to need 2 of these wreath forms from the Dollar Tree. You're going to need one of these wood hanging decor pieces from the Dollar Tree. And then I grabbed this 12-pack of wooden eggs from Michael's. They were $9.99 on sale. And then I do believe that they are even clearanced right now at Michael's. I'm going to take 3 different paint colors. They're all from Dixie Belle, the Sea Glass, Apricot, and Farmhouse Green. And I'm going to split my eggs into 3 sets of 4. So I'm going to paint each set of 4 one of those colors from Dixie Belle. Once those are all done, I'm going to take that little wooden piece from the Dollar Tree. It does have some holes in the top, and I just filled those in with some wood filler, and then I'm going to paint the entire thing in one rough coat of my Waverly chalk paint and plaster. I do take a chip brush and a water-based stain, and I'm just going through and dry brushing over the entire sign. I'm going to take this rub-on transfer from that same pack from Dixie Belle, and I'm going to use the Welcome to the Farm transfer. Now, my wooden sign was a little bit too long, so I did mark it off where it needed to be cut, and I did cut that down with a miter saw. And then I am going to add my transfer to the front. And again, we're just going to do the same technique with the big popsicle stick that they send, and I'm just going to rub all over the entire thing, and then slowly pulling back the clear sheet on the top and rubbing as I go. I'm going to remove that cover sheet. And then I just did a little bit more dry brushing and a little bit more of adding some distressing to it with the chip brush and that water-based stain over the entire thing. That's a nice thing that I like about these transfers is you can distress over them and paint over them and they still look really great. And then moving on to the wreath, I'm going to take one wreath face down and a whole bunch of Spanish moss. Now, I didn't want this to be separated into a ton of pieces, which is why I'm kind of just pulling it and stretching it and trying to get it to wrap around the entire wreath. It almost did. If I had a little bit more, I would have been able to have it go all around the entire thing, but I'm just going to stretch it all around that wreath and then add a little bit more Spanish moss when I need to there at the end. And then I'm going to set those eggs out all over the Spanish moss and the wreath. And I just kind of did a pattern back and forth. And then I did end up hot gluing my eggs down. Now, obviously, this isn't going to, do a whole lot of good. They're still only attached to the Spanish moss, but I just wanted to secure them just a little bit so that they aren't like rolling all over the place and they are stuck to the Spanish moss and where I need them to be. Now, one thing that I would recommend doing first before adding your Spanish moss or your eggs is adding some floral wire between each of those prongs that are on the wreath. There should be about 6 prongs that hold, all 3 rings together. I'm going to take some floral wire and wrap it around each of those prongs on the middle and then on the outside of the ring. We will use that to attach another wreath to this wreath as well. So I just add my floral wire, add a little bit of hot glue just to make sure that it's keeping that floral wire in place. And then I'm going to set my other wreath on top of this piece and I'm going to try to match up those prongs so that I can take that floral wire, wrap it around the prongs, and then secure that in place. This will just make it so that it's not, moving all around and twisting if you make sure to secure it on those prongs that are matching up on each wreath. Hopefully you can understand what I'm meaning, but you can definitely see what I'm doing. So, well, sort of. You can kind of see what I'm doing, which is why adding the floral wire before you put the Spanish moss down is a lot easier and you're not having to struggle to see the floral wire. And then once your inner circle is done, you're going to move on to your outside and securing your 2 wreaths together. Again, I'm just securing them right where the prongs are, and I just twist them all together and make sure that they're all nice and, secured in place. So that's how you can attach your 2 wreaths together. And then I wanted to make sure that the wire isn't super visible. So I did take some more Spanish moss and just kind of push it through and kind of try to hide those wires as best as I could so that they weren't as noticeable. I'm going to go back to my sign and I'm going to take these decorative push pins that I thought were really cute. You can get them from Hobby Lobby. Now, these were going to be way too long to go through my sign, so I decided to just cut off the ends and just hot glue the push pins down to each corner of my sign. And then I just made sure that they were nice and secure in there. So that's all you're going to do to finish off your little sign, and then you are just going to hot glue it down to your wreath. And then I made sure to flip my wreath over on the back, add some more hot glue just to make sure that that was even more secure and in place. And then to finish off this DIY, we are going to make a bow. I got this ribbon from Hobby Lobby. I just measured out my tails and then measured out how big I wanted the bow portion at the top to be. I hot glued the ends to make this one big loop for my bow, and then I added my tails to the back of my bow and added some twine around the middle. I tied that in a double knot and just let it all kind of scrunch together as I pulled that twine tight and tied a double knot. And then I just wanted to make the middle a big chunky looking middle with some twine, so I just wrapped my twine over and over and over and then tied a double knot on the back to secure that in place. Now all you're going to do is add some hot glue to the back of your bow, glue it to the top of your wreath. I dovetailed the ends on both of my tails, and then I did hot glue them so there were kind of, you know, a little ruffle going on with the tails and they weren't just flat. And that is it for this DIY. I thought this turned out really, really cute. You could leave this up for Easter, even for next year, or have it up as just your farmhouse decor. For this DIY, I'm going to grab one of these removable decals that you can get from the Dollar Tree. And then I grabbed this pack of 2 round signs from the Target dollar spot. It was $5. I'm just going to use one of them for this DIY. And I'm going to take that sticker from the Dollar Tree and I'm going to add it to the front of this round sign. And I just centered it as best as I could. And then I took a blade and cut all the edges off from the corners. Now I wanted to paint this with my Farmhouse Green chalk paint from Dixie Belle. I love that this piece is textured, so even though I'm painting over it, you'll still be able to see that pattern peeking through, which I love. I'm going to give this 2 coats of this chalk paint, and I'm even going to go around all the sides, and I paint the back as well. I'm going to set that aside to dry, and in a bowl that you can throw away, I'm going to do a resin kit. So I got my resin kit from Walmart in their glue section. You're going to add the first part of your resin and then the second part of your resin, and you just want to make sure that you're adding equal parts. Once you've added both of those, you're going to mix it and mix it and mix it for 3 minutes. Also, make sure you're wearing protective gloves and that you're in a well-ventilated area. I made sure to have my window open up while I was doing this DIY. Now, I grabbed a glass bowl from the Dollar Tree and I'm going to add my resin mixture into that glass. And then I also grabbed these really pretty white florals from Michael's, I believe. They were $1.99, and I'm just going to take a couple of them, cut off those stems at the bottom, and then add them into my resin. I wanted this to look like flowers that were floating on top of water. So I'm just going to stick those in there and let that dry. And then I'm going to go over the top of my round sign, and I wanted the texture to kind of pop up a little bit more. So I'm going to take a chip brush from the Dollar Tree and some white Waverly chalk paint and just dry brush all over that entire thing, just again to make that texture kind of pop out more. And then to finish off, I'm just going to add some super glue around the top of my bowl, and I'm going to set my sign on top of that. And then you have this really pretty little riser and tray that has the floating flowers in the bottom. I just thought that this was such a fun project. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. this DIY, I'm going to take 2 of these wooden pieces from the Dollar Tree, these little drawers. I'm going to take out the middle drawers. I'm not going to use those. I'm going to use the outside pieces. And I'm going to take my Dixie Belle chalk paint in Apricot, and I'm going to give both of these one good coat. And then I'm going to attach these with some hot glue. I'm going to put them kind of on an angle so they're not just straight on top of each other. And then I'm going to take some of these stickers from the Dollar Tree, and I just added a couple of these to the front of both of those cubes. And then I'm just going to add some floral foam into that top piece, add some white flowers from Michael's. These were $1.99, and then I just cut those down and added them into the top, and that's it for this DIY. You have this really pretty planter that I think looks really great for spring. And that's it for today's DIYs. Let me know what your favorite project was in the comments down below. I will have everything linked: COUTURE, Dixie, Belle, Amazon items. They will all be in my description box if you're interested. Don't forget to subscribe before you guys leave. Give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!